Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is HarrisX founder and CEO, Dritan Nesho. Dritan, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me back, Britt.
You have some new numbers from a HarrisX Harvard CAPS poll, all from June. I want you to break it down for us. So let's start from the top. Let's start with President Trump's approval rating. Where does that sit right now, just a few months into his second term?
Well, the president has had a pretty eventful month, and his approval rating is largely steady with what we saw in May. However, it is trending down, and it has been trending down since really he announced the tariffs in early April. So the president started a 52% approval rating in February. It largely held in March. Then it fell fairly significantly in April, and now he's at 46%. So things are steady, but with this slight downwards trend, and it's yet to be seen whether or not the president will break this downward trend in the next month or two as he nears the 6 months in office mark and really reclaim 50% approval or higher as he had in the beginning, or whether, all of a sudden we'll wake up and we'll find him at 40% approval or around 40% approval. So I think a lot of things are in play right now, and the public is in a cautious wait and see attitude when it comes to Trump, his policies, but also the way that Democrats are countering Trump.
We've been in wait and see for a few months now when it comes to these tariffs. So because you're seeing this downward spiral, does it seem like people are still waiting and seeing, but approving him a little bit less? And how does that really, historically, what does that really mean for Trump? Has he seen this before?
Well, by historical standards, he's doing fine compared to himself in the first term, but also other presidents within the first, 6 months of their time in office. The political reality tends to slap you in the face pretty hard and pretty quickly when you are the commander in chief and you're running the country. But I will read for the audience in terms of how he's doing in different areas and what the approval ratings are. So the highest approval rating that Trump carries is on immigration. In May, he was at 51%. Today, he's at 49%. He's had a high of 56% on immigration. And generally, the public approves of the goals of his immigration policies, even though, as we'll talk in a minute, sometimes they, have reservation in terms of how they're approached. And you see this at play when we'll talk about the riots in Los Angeles. In a similar fashion, returning Americas to its values, 48% of voters approve of Trump's job in that regard, and he's garnered a high of 53% at the beginning of his term. And administering the government, reducing the cost of government, he's at 46%, more or less. Foreign affairs, 45%. Where he's getting low marks is tariffs and trade, 41%, and handling inflation, 42%. And especially the inflation, the approval on handling inflation and the inflation issue is very important for Trump, because this is one of the reasons why he was elected, and this is one of the reasons why the Democrats came crushing down before the presidential election. The inability to move the public on concerns around inflation. So there's a very wide range, as you would expect with Trump. Slight downward trends across the board, but that's just governing, right? And it happens to all presidents.
I want to talk, before we get into all the issues, I want to talk about one specific issue between two people, the world's richest billionaire as well as the world's most powerful leader. Yes, I'm talking about the fight between Donald Trump and Elon Musk. And we saw this, the disintegration of this relationship pretty rapidly, because a week before, less than a week before, Elon Musk was in the Oval Office, and President Trump called Elon Musk, quote, one of the greatest business leaders and innovators the world has ever produced. And Musk said that he expected to remain a friend and advisor to Trump. That doesn't really seem to be the case because there was a barrage of social media posts, mostly from Elon Musk. Some of the most fiery included Musk claiming Trump was in the Epstein files. He reposted a post saying that President Trump should be impeached. Said that the tariffs would cause a recession. And then Musk has since walked some of those insults back, saying he regretted some of the posts and that he took it a little bit too far. But what do the American people think about this fight?
Well, we asked a series of questions around the fight, more for fun than anything. But I think that this is a fight that Trump wins on a few different dimensions. Elon rightly understood that he overstepped within the fight. So, first and foremost, we ask, who do you generally trust more when it comes to economic policy, Trump or Musk, or neither or both equally? And leaving neither aside, which was 49% of the public and both equally 11%, 33% said they trust Donald Trump versus 7% who said that they trust Elon Musk. So the level of trust when it comes to Trump and his administration around economic policy is 4 or 5 times higher than when it comes to Elon. Then we asked, what were the motivations around the fight? Did you think that Musk was acting out of genuine concern for economic policy, or was he more motivated by his personal and business interests? And 41% mostly motivated by personal and business gain, followed by 35% who said a mix of both, followed by 12% who said it was a genuine concern for national economic policy. So again, some of the motivations, the fact that the EV tax credits were eliminated from the bill, and there were several provisions in there that would personally harm Musk's businesses, this was not lost on the general public. And Elon might have truly been motivated by genuine concern, and voters actually do share concern around the bill that it will add to the national debt. And they're very split on the bill that Trump is trying to put forward, the big, beautiful bill, because of that. But it didn't really come through within the fight, right? And, the labeling, calling it a disgusting abomination, people were very split on whether it was appropriate or inappropriate. So, this is one of those temporary fights. It has already blown over. The plurality, 40% said that this is a temporary fight, whereas the rest, either put their heads up in the air when we asked the question, said too early to tell. Only about a quarter said that there's a growing divide. And the fact that Elon apologized and kind of shifted course says a lot about the way that public opinion settled pretty quickly after the start of this fight.
And let's talk about the moment we saw this fight really ratchet up, which you described as when Elon Musk really went after the big, beautiful bill. And President Trump characterized that legislation as arguably the most significant piece of legislation that will ever be signed. This is his hallmark policy in here. Elon Musk called it a disgusting abomination. Where do the American people feel? Where do they more side with when it comes to this legislation? Do they feel like it's that important as President Trump says? Do they think it's a disgusting abomination like how Elon Musk characterized it? I mean, what do they make of this act?
Well, they're somewhere in the middle, right? And first off, voters are split in their understanding of whether or not the TCJA, the original tax bill from 2017, led to economic growth and prosperity, or whether it just added to debt. So that's the starting point. Then, when you ask them, will it increase making these tax cuts permanent? Before you get into the elements of the big beautiful bill, because it's a wide-ranging bill, when you ask them, will it increase debt or will it decrease it by a factor of 2 to 1? They think that it will increase debt. So 40% said increase debt, 21% said decrease the debt in the long term because of economic growth and several other provisions in the package, and the rest were unsure. So while 2/3 of voters have heard of Trump big beautiful bill, and there are provisions in that bill that they like, specific line items, they're very concerned on whether or not the bill balances tax relief and spending. And they really right now think that it adds too much to the federal debt. And therefore, they're quite split on it, quite split on whether it'll make the economy worse or it'll improve the economy. Um, Trump has not sold the public yet on the big beautiful bill. That's the bottom line of it.
And so we saw this last month. It narrowly passed in a House vote. It's now before the Senate. And something that Democrats and Republicans, lawmakers in the House and the Senate, the only thing all of them can really agree on is that changes will need to be made in order for it to even have a chance at passing in the Senate. And the few points of contention, you touched on one of them being the national debt. And the CBO, which is a nonpartisan office, said that this will add $3 trillion to the national debt over the next decade. Another point of contention are Medicaid cuts, which will leave millions uninsured over the next decade. What do people think about that? Are they concerned that millions of people will be left without insurance with this bill?
So, when we ask the question about imposing work requirements on Medicaid and SNAP recipients, and that's the functional language that we tested as part of the bill, actually 51% support the provision and only 44% are against it, with 15% being roughly in the middle. So, really depends how it's framed. In general, voters do not want their entitlements. They do not want these programs to be touched, even though at the same time an overwhelming amount supports balanced budgets going forward, which by definition would actually require a lot of cuts to these different types of programs. So it's really a question of how it's framed and which side exhibits leadership on the specific provisions. I think that net, when it comes to imposing work requirements on Medicaid and SNAP recipients, it obviously there's an affected demographic that is going to cry foul and is going to push very hard to make sure that these benefits are not lost. But the public net on that specific provision would go with Trump. Not by a lot, but it would go with Trump.
I want to talk about tariffs now because that seems to be one of the main factors that's dragging down President Trump's approval rating just a little bit. And we're not seeing much movement on the negotiation on the deals aspect of these tariffs. Last week, we did see a handshake for a framework for a deal between the United States and China, but the tariff deadline does loom. It's less than a month away before those reciprocal tariffs go back in place, before deals need to be made. I mean, what do the American people think about all the tariff talk?
Well, they're split down the middle. I mean, they're still hopeful that Trump will reach a deal with the Chinese, and they're hopeful that Trump will usher the economy into a better place. These are some of the reasons why they voted for Trump. So he hasn't quite lost that. But really, Trump owns the economy right now, and voters are very, very split about what's happening. So we asked a series of questions around tariffs and the economy, and it really illustrates where things stand, right? So we asked, who do you trust more to manage the economy? The Trump administration and Republicans or Democrats in Congress? 50-50 split. Who is mostly responsible for the state of the economy today? Donald Trump or Joe Biden? 55% Donald Trump. He owns it. Do you think Trump's policies are making the U.S. economy stronger or weaker? 51% stronger, 59% weaker. That's a statistical tie. Are Trump's policies leading to more or less jobs in the country? 49% more, 51% less. Again, a statistical tie. Are Trump's policies leading to more or less investment in the country? This is a big issue for Trump, right? He went to the Gulf region and announced trillions of dollars worth of investments. The voters aren't really sold on it. 49% say leading to more investment, 51% say less investment. Is Trump winning or losing the battle against inflation? 44% winning, 56% losing. This is a concerning statistic for Trump. Are Trump's tariff policies boosting or harming the economy? Again, a concerning statistic. 57% say that his tariff policies are harming the economy. But then when you ask how confident are you that Trump's economic policies will lead to stronger economic growth, 47% say confident. It's a little bit down from last month where it was at 50%, and 55% not confident. So there isn't really a question that we ask about the economy or about the tariffs or about inflation that doesn't have the public very, very split. And this is cause for a lot of concern with Trump because arguably you could say that he shot himself in the foot by pushing too many tariffs, too deep, too hard, too fast. The economy has proven remarkably resilient, but really there is a gap between whether or not voters today think the country is headed in the right direction and whether or not they think the economy is strong. A majority think the economy is strong, but a bigger majority of 60% or plus actually think the country is and the economy is headed in the wrong direction. And so I think that 3 weeks from now, a month from now, we'll be monitoring very closely together what happens once the tariffs come due. But that is a moment in time that holds a lot for good or for bad for the Trump administration and how the first 6 months shape up to be.
That's especially alarming for President Trump, considering that he won the election in large part because voters thought he could handle top issues like the economy better than Vice President Kamala Harris. Another one of those issues is immigration. I want to talk about that now because we saw protests break out all over the country over ICE and their deportation practices. But about a week and a half ago, we saw demonstrations in Los Angeles over workplace raids by ICE. And the scene on the ground, by some reports, has been called largely peaceful with pockets of violence and chaos. We've also seen images and heard stories of cars being lit on fire, vandalism, and skirmishes between law enforcement and protesters. We even saw a video of a motorcycle driving into police officers. So what do voters and Americans think about the scene in Southern California over the past week and a half?
Well, voters are clearly against violence. And the paradox in the public opinion around the LA riots is that a majority, 56%, believe that Trump should have the power to trigger the National Guard in those types of a situation. And they supported Trump sending the troops to quell the violence. At the same time, though, 55% believe that Trump really escalated the situation through the very strong-handed immigration raids in a corner of the country that has a lot of immigrants, and I'm sure that that was deliberate by the administration, and then also escalated it by immediately sending the National Guard rather than relying on some kind of a process. So actually, the public and voters are very sensible in their position. In one side, a very strong majority said that the mayor in LA and the governor in California should have done more to condemn the violence. They should have sent the police to protect the federal agent from violent acts. And because they didn't do this, Trump was justified in sending the National Guard and the Marines to protect the ICE agents. But at the same time, when it comes to who created the combustible environment, they blame more Trump than they blame Democratic leaders. And again, this is the story on immigration, right? The goals of the president's policy, closing the borders, removing criminal immigrants from the country as fast as we can, they have overwhelming support, right? Two-thirds support closing the border or clamping it down, and three-fourths, 75% support removing illegal immigrants who are criminals. But at the same time, 50-50 believe that good people are actually being removed when the goal should be criminal illegal immigrants, and the majority support Democrats fighting for due process and believe that Democrats are standing up for citizens' rights and human rights when they're doing so. So really, I would say that bottom line, it's the execution that is challenging for the administration. Sometimes the antagonism, it's almost pre-designed in terms of how these policies are carried out. But voters still support Trump when it comes to the policies themselves.
And something you've alluded to in this conversation is that standoff between Governor Gavin Newsom and President Trump, because against the governor's wishes, President Trump deployed the National Guard and then additional Marine troops. And this was the first time a president has done this without a governor asking in 60 years. So is what you're saying that the American people are more in the middle when it comes to this issue? They can almost see both sides, but they do think that the Trump administration is acting a little too much in this situation.
Yeah, I mean, there's precedent for the president using the National Guard to restore order or push for a federal policy that's not being enacted at the state level. In the 1960s, during the Civil Rights Act's era, Eisenhower, Kennedy, several presidents actually used the National Guard to push through for policies. So I think that where it comes down to it is that voters do not want violence, and voters still are in a wait and see posture when it comes to Trump policies. They're really allowing President Trump to play his hand when it comes to his policies and his promises, which almost all have majority approval. And that's where the Democrats are getting it wrong because they are essentially resisting many policies that voters are in favor of. Where Trump is getting it wrong and where the Democrats are seizing the opportunity and winning points with the electorate is really in the execution of these policies. Some of these policies are not very well thought out of. Many of these policies are being enacted in a very antagonizing way, and voters also don't like that. So you're right, voters are in the middle, but they're showing remarkable, or public opinion is reflecting remarkable sensibility when it comes to how they're judging the actions from both sides. And really key for both sides, whether it's Donald Trump on one side or Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass, if the situation in LA continues on the other side, is that whoever shows the most sensibility and acts the most pragmatically is the one that's going to win points in the courtroom of public opinion on this issue.
I'm curious just how generous you think, or you've seen in the past, the American people be when it comes to waiting and seeing. Because I could see if it was a president's first term, right? And you wait the first 6 months, you see how things go out, you let them settle in. But this is technically, I know it's different times, but technically President Trump's second term. I know he had that 4-year break, but it is his second term. So he's been a president now for 4 years and 6 months, roughly. I mean, how much longer are the Americans going to give him that benefit of waiting and seeing?
Well, it depends on whether or not Trump has wins to show to his base and the broader public or not. American voters like accomplishment, they like winning. And I will give you kind of the story of where the public is through 3 different questions and 3 different charts that we asked. We asked the question, do you think Democrats should oppose everything the Trump administration is doing, or should they take more of a wait and see attitude towards his actions? 58% said take more of a wait and see attitude. We then asked, do you think Democrats should oppose Trump on tariffs and trade policy, or should they see how this initiative plays out over the next few months? They're more split there. 49% say oppose, 51% say see how the tariffs play out. And then on the question of do you think the Democrats should oppose Trump on immigration policy or see how this initiative plays out? And on immigration, Trump has more to show than on the economy and tariffs and other issues. There are 54% say let it play out, and 46% and a growing share of the voter base say oppose Trump on immigration. So I think that as we approach the 6 month mark, if Trump has wins and the public understands that these wins are not just red meat for the base, but they're pushing the country towards a better place, they will give him more runway. And as he acquires these wins, he has then the ability to move forward and push for more of his policies. And if he doesn't, and if there is another debacle on tariffs, then what you'll see is job approvals dropping even further, and voters saying, "Okay, now uh, we let you play your hand. You weren't really able to accomplish what you say you were." By the way, these questions, this is the midterm playing out live in front of our eyes a year and a half before the midterm actually happens. The midterm will be decided by questions like this. And this is why we're tracking the specific questions, because if voters still give Trump the benefit of the doubt, then the Republicans will be heading into the midterms with a lot of wind in their back, a lot of tailwind. And if these numbers flip and voters all of a sudden say, "You played your hand, we're not giving you a wait and see attitude anymore," then you should expect the Democrats to have the tailwind as they go into the midterms.
And I do want to take our eyes off of domestic issues for a moment and look abroad. I want to look at the Middle East because it's important to note, first of all, that this poll was taken before Israel struck some of Iran's nuclear and military sites last week, and we are continuing to see escalation in that conflict there. But the timing of the attack was important, and some of the questions go on about that because it comes as the United States has held multiple rounds of talks with Iran regarding a potential nuclear deal. A sixth one was scheduled for this past weekend, but that was ultimately canceled after Israel struck Iran. But what do people think about the United States and Iran talking, a potential nuclear deal? What does that really look like?
A great question. I mean, as you mentioned, this poll was in field before Israel struck Iran. And while the majority of the public, 60%, supported President Trump engaging Iran directly for negotiations over their nuclear weapons, um, uh, frankly, 85% believe that Iran should not be allowed to obtain a nuclear weapon. And they want, 74% said that giving up their nuclear enrichment capabilities should be a precondition for any deal. So the public is actually quite hawkish when it comes to Iran policy because for many years they viewed Iran as the source of instability in the Middle East. And for good reason, right? I mean, this has played out over many, many years since the first Trump administration and all the way up until today. So when we ask some more difficult questions, like would you support or oppose taking out Iran's nuclear weapons in a military operation, 54% said support and 46% said oppose, without naming who it is, right? So they could have considered this to be the United States. And then we asked a further question and said, if no acceptable deal with Iran is reached over its nuclear capability and nuclear weapons, should the administration support or oppose an Israeli effort to take out Iran's nuclear weapons program? And here, 60% said support. And that includes 54% of independents, 78% of Republicans, and even 47% of Democrats. So as this war is playing out, the country is actually siding with Israel and supporting what Israel is doing in terms of removing Iran's nuclear capabilities and some other military capabilities because they view Iran as the main culprit of instability and death in the Middle East today.
Well, Dritan, I really appreciate you coming on, sharing these really fascinating numbers. I love getting a glimpse of where the American people are at in every step of President Trump's second term. I'm already looking forward to our next conversation. Thank you so much for joining me.
See you next month. Thank you. Thank you, Britt.